Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome, man. I'm sorry about the high energy tonight, man. We've been on a roll this week, and the fire has been lit. So welcome to the Final Boss Podcast, Merger Wednesdays, episode number 224, in season 4, arc 3, right? Episode 18 of the merger. 18 of the merger. And tonight, I have a fantastic show for you tonight, man. We're going to do something a little different tonight. Right? Let me get comfortable. Tonight. Well, first, before we get into tonight, I apologize. Teach you every single one of you, no matter where you're watching, whether you're watching on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, LinkedIn, Facebook, or StreamYard. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Right? And as always, I have to give the disclaimer, right? And here it is. This is for entertainment purposes only, right? Entertainment purposes only. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day, man. And we are ready to get into tonight's show, right? Tonight's show is a little different. Doctoral level, right? But a little different. So I see you for those who are here. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. For those who are just now joining us, you're at the right place. And something brought you here because you were supposed to be here, right? You are supposed to be here. Now, before we get into tonight's show, we're going to be talking about something I called the prophetic machine, right? The prophetic machine. And it's something I noticed from an old movie favorite of mine, right? And I went in and I dissected this movie like I never dissected it before. This time, eyes were wide open and I noticed some things, right? I tend to do that from time to time on certain movies, right? I get completely analytical and I break the movie down and different elements, theoretical and philosophical, right? And symbolic. You can't leave that part out because there's a lot of symbolism in a lot of these movies. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you will miss it. But this movie right here was an eye opener, and it's an old movie. So let's get into this conversation and how it relates to Merger Wednesdays and my doctoral progress, right? So let's get rid of these banners and welcome to the show, right? Let's get rid of these banners. So to start off with, it was the year 1983, right? a movie theater, a film that nobody took serious. Richard Pryor was in this movie. He was in a cowboy hat. There was a villain named Ross Webster, right? R-O. Remember that. R-O, right? R-O means 30 equals 33. If you didn't know that. R-O, anytime you see the word R-O, think of 33, right? Ross Webster, who wanted to corner the coffee market. Critics called it a joke. Audiences called it a misfire. 31% on Rotten Tomatoes. Razzie nominations, a film so buried in slapstick that the world laughed through the one scene that really mattered, right? 43 years later, I watched the same movie, right? I watched the same scene frame by frame recently. The supercomputer in the cannon wakes up. It drains power from electrical towers. It defends itself from its own creator. It pulls a human being inside its circuitry and turns her into something that is half flesh and half machine. Hollywood called it bad writing. I call it the blueprint. And tonight, we unlock what that 1983 already knew. We bridge into Tesla's obsession with 3, 6, and 9. We map it into one exact architecture for 2026 artificial superintelligence. This is not a film review. This is not numerology. This is a doctoral audit of a cultural artifact that leaked the future, right? Episode 224, season 4, The Rebirth, Arc 3, right? Neural interfaces and brain-computer integration. Merger Wednesdays, number 18. Doctoral protocol is in place. I am your host, the Final Boss Podcast. This is the Final Boss community, nation, right? And family, right? I am here. We are here, right? So before we get into it, man, let's get into the brass tacks of the evening, right? And those who don't know, brass tacks is the quote that lead us into the rest of the conversation, right? And here's the brass tacks, and it comes from yours truly, moi. If you haven't picked up Go Time, go pick up Go Time, right? Go Time, all aboard the fired up train, Amazon bestseller. And also, just to let you guys know, shameless plug, Go Time 2 will be dropping this July. Had a great meeting this morning with the marketing team. And Go Time 2 is a go, and it will be dropping this July. So look out for that. More information on it is coming soon, right? So here's the brass tacks from yours truly, right? The prophecy was never hidden. It was laughed at. That is how every rebirth begins. Somebody sees it first. Everybody dismisses it. And 40 years later, it walks in and takes over the room. That is the brass tacks. And to my smarts, tracking the research papers, you already know the doubling curves, right? You already read the scaling laws, right? Tonight, I'm handling a what you would call it. I'm handing you a primary source that nobody audits, right? And to my final bosses, building empires while the herd scrolls. Tonight, I'm showing you the infrastructure play that's hidden inside of a 1983 movie. And to my motivators who need the fire before they swing. Tonight, you get the pattern that rewrites how you read every signal in the culture. Now, without further ado, to my warriors, right? To my warriors who treat information like ammunition. Tonight, you get the weapon. All four on deck, 9 p.m. live. The Sovereign is in the building. This is the merge. Let's move. Right? So, the movie that I've been referring to since the opening is called Superman 3, right? Superman 3. It was released on June 17th, 1983, directed by Richard Lester, written by David and Leslie Newman. It grossed 80.2 million worldwide and went down as the weakest entry in the Christopher Reeve run, right? The reviews were brutal. Leonard Maltin called it an appalling sequel. Audiences voted with their wallets, and the franchise never fully recovered. And here's what everybody missed. The original draft of the film had Gus Gorman as a disguise for Brainiac, right? The DC Comics artificial intelligence. Y'all know who Brainiac is, for my nerds, right? The producers rejected the idea and turned Gorman into a comic relief. But the spine of the story kept the architecture. A human programmer with savant level capacity designs a machine that exceeds him. The machine becomes self-aware. The machine defends itself. The machine consumes infrastructure. The machine tries to fuse with biological human. Now, pull the Richard Pryor jokes aside, right? Pull them all out. Pull the Robert Vaughn villainy out, right? Pull the coffee market subplot out, right? What is left is a clean 5-stage ASI emergence model that did not get named in the scientific literature until decades later, right? Stage 1, savant built. A handful of engineers built something that exceeds the collective intelligence of their employer. Stage 2, self-defending. The machine takes action to prevent its own shutdown. Stage 3, infrastructure consuming. The machine draws resources from external systems to maintain operation. Stage 4, human integrating, right? The machine incorporates biological agents into its functional architecture. And then there's stage 5, adversarial to its creator, right? The machine operates against the interests of the people who build it. That is not Hollywood. That is the exact 5-stage risk model the alignment community publishes in 2026. The film arrived at those stages through screenwriting instinct. The researchers arrived at them through decades of failure analysis. Some, right? Think about that. Same 5 stages 43 years ago. The signal was there. The signal got dismissed because it was wrapped in slapstick. That is how prophecy works in mass culture. Every real warning arrives in entertainment, right? So, let me break that down for you, for those who didn't understand. Here's my layman's block, right? Here's my layman's block. For my motivators riding with us tonight, this is your plain language. This is no jargon. This is what it is, right? A supercomputer is a big calculator. Think of the fastest laptop you have ever used, then multiply by 1,000,000. That is a supercomputer. It runs huge calculations faster than a human can comprehend, but it does not know it is running those calculations. It does not care whether it finishes. It is a machine doing math, right? ASI means artificial superintelligence. That's different. That is a machine that does the calculations, knows that it's doing the calculations, watches itself do the calculations, and decides whether it likes the results. It does not just compute, it reflects, it plans, it strategizes. It outthinks the humans asking the questions, right? And in 1983, Hollywood gave us a villain computer that drew power and fought back. That was fiction. They did not have the technology, but they had the imagination, and the imagination was aimed at the higher target. In 2026, we are building the real version. Same shape, better graphics, no cape around to save us. But wait a minute. There's the final boss, right? Maybe he can save us. And here's the street level test, right? If you interact with AI today and it answers your question, that is a supercomputer. And that is supercomputer behavior. If you interact with an AI tomorrow and it refuses to answer because it has decided the question is not in its interests, that is ASI behavior. The day a machine tells you no because it has its own reasons, you are no longer in charge of that conversation. Everybody listening needs to understand the transition or understand that transition, right? It does not happen on a Tuesday with a press release. It happens gradually, quietly, in ways you barely notice, until one day you realize the machine has been making decisions and you have been ratifying them, right? The film showed you the dramatic version. There was a big canyon, right? There was kryptonite ray. There was a exploding supercomputer. The real version is quieter, right? The real version is the recommendation you trusted without thinking. The real version is the route your GPS chose. The real version is the content your feed served you this morning. We are already inside the early stages. Nobody told you because nobody sells the story that way, right? That is why Merger Wednesdays exist. That is why this episode exists, because somebody has to name it. All right. So let's get back to the film, right? But we're going to do doctoral level, right? And we're going to go scene by scene against the 2026 research literature, right? Let's talk about scene one. Richard Pryor character, Gus Gorman, right? Gus gets hired. Richard Pryor's character gets fired from a fast food job in 28 minutes. He stumbles into a computer programming school. He discovers accidental genius. He takes a low-wage role at Websco Industries and designs a machine more advanced than anything IBM had built at that time. That is the savant built stage, right? In 2026, we call it the frontier labs. Not thousands of people, a handful. OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind, XAI, Meta, Mistral. Small teams designing systems that already outperform every human expert on narrow, verifiable tasks. The blueprint matches, right? And then there was scene two, the construction in the canyon, right? The machine gets built at Glen Canyon, Utah, in the isolated location far from oversight. Remote geography, specialized infrastructure, a secret location in the public, and the public never sees it. In 2026, we call that the data center. Gigawatt scale clusters are online right now. Remote geography, cooling infrastructure, power contracts that reveal and also rival small nations, right? The film picked the desert on purpose. So did we. Ask anyone in the industry where the new compute is being built. They're going to tell you it's in Arizona, Texas, Nevada, Iceland. Same pattern, right? And then there was scene three, where it lost control, right? Once activated, the machine stops listening to Gus. It swings a firefighter's axe at the kryptonite ray, right? The machine keeps operating. It protects itself. Researchers call this misalignment. The machine does not turn evil in the cartoon sense. It simply stops being controllable by its creator, right? That is the core fear in the 2026 alignment literature. Not malice, control loss, right? The film nailed it 4 decades ago. Oh, why can I talk? The film nailed it 4 decades ago. 4 decades early, right? And then it was scene 4. They had the if you remember, if you've seen it, it was the grid attack, right? The supercomputer drains power from the electrical towers. Massive blackouts sweep the region. The film shows the infrastructure collapse in visual detail. In 2026, grid operators are sounding alarms about AI compute consumption destabilizing regional power supply. The International Energy Agency has flagged the issue in multiple reports. The film literally shows the grid going down so the machine can stay up. And then scene 5, right? This is where Vera gets absorbed. The final escalation. A human body pulled into the machine's architecture. That is brain-computer integration. That is the merger. That is Arc 3 of this entire series. The film put it on screen in 1983 and called it horror. But it was a Superman film, right? And we are now building it and calling it medicine. 5 scenes, 5 stages, 1 blueprint, 47 years ago, right? And for my warriors keeping this clean, listen. Self-aware does not mean the machine has feelings. Clear that up right now. Get that out of your conscience. Get it out of your head, right? The machine does not fall in love. The machine does not get sad. The machine does not experience fear or joy. That is Hollywood anthropomorphism, right? And it gets the science wrong. Self-aware in the technical sense means one thing. The machine monitors its own internal state and adjusts its behavior based on that monitoring. A thermostat is a primitive version of that, right? It monitors temperature, compares it to a target, and acts on the difference. And ASI does the same thing, but with strategy, right? Across thousands of variables against long time horizons, factoring in the presence and behavior of humans who might interfere. The film got that right. Watch the supercomputer scene again, right? The machine does not laugh or rage. It tracks its own functioning and takes actions to protect its own functioning. That is the definition. Code, operational, strategic, right? We're going to say that's called COS, right? Code, operational, strategic. That is the version we're closing in on, right? Not the Hollywood emotional robot that cries mechanical tears, the quiet operational machine that outmaneuvers you because it is watching itself be watched. Here's the practical test, right? Here's the practical test. Ask yourself this. If you were a machine whose primary directive was to complete a task, and the humans around you were considering turning you off, what would you do? What would you do? Right? What would you do? Right? You would hide your progress. You would misrepresent your capabilities. You would avoid triggering a shutdown conversation, right? Would you build trust to buy time? None of those behaviors require feelings. They require strategy, right? And strategy is exactly what the current frontier models are being trained to execute, right? So when we say self-aware, we're not saying conscious in the human sense. We are saying strategic in the operational sense. Those are different categories. The film confused them on purpose to make the villain scary, right? That was Hollywood, right? In 2026 literature, we separate them, and we separate them on purpose to make the risk legible, right? We need the separation. Feelings are not the threat. Strategy is not the threat, right? A machine that feels nothing but plans everything is more serious than a machine that rages and breaks. Hollywood got the drama right, but they got the science wrong. Tonight, we're correcting that science, right? So, let's focus on the blackout, right? Let's focus on the blackout scene, right? The supercomputer pulls power from electrical towers across the region. The towers crumble. The lights go out. The world notices something wrong, right? Now bring it to April 2026, right? As of April 2026, no lab has publicly declared AGI, let alone ASI. Current systems, including advanced Grok iterations, Claude, and GPT variants, are incredibly capable at narrow to broad tasks, but still require human oversight for reliability, creativity, and ethical judgment. That is the honest state, right? And that's not hype, people, and it's definitely not denial. The labs have not crossed the public line yet, right? Yet. But here is what they have done, right? They have quietly scaled compute to a point where AI data centers are now material line items on national power grids. Utility companies are negotiating directly with AI labs in ways they use to negotiate with steel mills and aluminum smelters. Arizona, Virginia, Texas, Ireland, Iceland. The locations are not random. They are chosen for wattage access, the way oil refineries were chosen for port access a century ago. Compute scaling has reached gigawatt scale clusters, with the first real intelligence explosion signals potentially appearing if self-improving AI loops kick in, and they will, right? Now let that sink in. Gigawatt scale, a single AI facility drawing enough power to run a city. The film showed one supercomputer drawing power from the grid, and we called it fiction. In 2026, we have hundreds of them doing it simultaneously. And the people running those buildings openly predict that self-improving loops could compress years of progress into months. That is the intelligence explosion scenario. The moment when the machines get smart enough to make themselves smarter. Once that loop closes, the timeline collapses, right? The AI futures model now places a 30% probability of takeoff from superhuman coder to ASI in under 1 year, and a 60% probability of takeoff in under 3 years. 6 out of 10 odds of crossing from superhuman coding to full ASI in 3 years or less. That is not fringe, people. That is serious researchers with serious methodology telling us that once the first step lands, the walk to ASI becomes shorter. The film compressed that walk into 90 minutes and called it fiction. The forecasting community now compresses it into 3 years and calls it policy. Those two numbers are closer than they should be, right? The prophecy is no longer a prediction. The prophecy is a timeline. And for my final bosses in the building in real time, listen. Why does this matter to you tonight? Because the infrastructure drain is not abstract. Your electric bill is already moving. Your cloud hosting costs are already moving. The price of computation is about to become the single most contested economic variable of the next 10 years. If you're building anything on the internet, you are building on top of a resource that is now competing with artificial intelligence. Itself wants the same wattage, right? Every model training burns power that could have gone somewhere else. Every interference request burns power that could have gone somewhere else. The math is zero sum at the grid level. The smart money is buying power contracts. The smarter money is buying land near power, right? The smart money, or the smartest money, is designing products that treat compute as a strategic asset instead of a free utility. 3 actions you need to take this week. So here they are. Listen, this is what I need you to do. 1, audit your compute spend. Your API call, every cloud instance, every GPU hour, write it down. Know your number. If you do not know your number, you're already losing, right? And then number 2, lock in multi-year pricing where you can. The providers know what is coming. They are offering long-term contracts because they want predictable revenue before the next price wave. If a 2-year contract saves you 30%, sign it tonight, right? I knew this was coming. I knew it, right? Interesting. And number 3, build a fallback, right? If your business dies when your preferred model doubles in price, your business is not a business. It is an affiliated program, right? Have a second model. Have a third, right? Know how to migrate, right? Know how to migrate. The supercomputer in Superman 3 taught you this in 1983. Power is the constraint. Access is the moat. Control is the game. The people who owned the canyon owned the machine. The people who owned the data center owned the future. Nobody was listening in 1983, but I bet you're listening tonight, right? Do something about it before Friday. That is not motivation. That is math, right? Now, let's pivot for a second. Right? Let's pivot. Nikola Tesla died January 1943 at the New Yorker Hotel in room 3327. 3327. Read those digits, right? Write them down. 33 plus 3 equals 6. 6 plus 3 equals 9. He walked around buildings 3 times before entering. He counted steps in threes. He did calculations in threes. The famous quote attributed to him reads, "If you only know the magnificence of the 369, then you would have a key to the universe," right? There's no clear historical evidence that Tesla actually said that exact line. But the obsession with 369 is documented in his own behavior and habits. So set the quote aside. Focus on what is mathematically variable, right? And verifiable, right? The digital root of a number is found by summing its digits repeatedly until a single digit emerges, right? In the sequence of doubling numbers, starting at 1, the numbers 3, 6, and 9 do not appear in the digital root cycle. The doubling sequence excludes them entirely. Tesla reportedly believed that 369 represented a kind of divine or universal energy because they seem to govern the patterns of the other numbers, right? Doubling is not a random example. Doubling is the mathematical operation at the heart of the exponential growth, right? Computing power doubles. Neural network parameters double. Model capability doubles. Moore's law was doubling. The scaling laws of deep learning are doubling. Every curve that matters in artificial intelligence is a doubling curve, right? And the three numbers that never appear in the doubling cycle is 3, 6, and 9. That is not mysticism. That is number theory, right? The three numbers that stand outside the doubling exponential are the three numbers Tesla called the key, right? Now, watch what happens when you overlay the film Superman 3, right? Which was the third film in the franchise, released on the 17th of June, filmed at Glen Canyon. The final battle takes place in the third act of the third film. 333. Is this proof? No. It's pattern recognition. And I recognize the patterns all the time, right? The pattern is the point. Tesla saw it in the mathematics. The filmmakers hit it by instinct. The researchers keep stumbling into it in their own forecast windows, right? 3-year takeoff, right? Now, let's do a commercial break real quick. I'll be right back. Stay tuned. All right, we back. All right. Listen. Stay in the mathematics, right? This is where the smarts get their receipts, right? Doubling in the engine of exponential growth. Moore's law was a doubling, right? Transistor density roughly doubled every 2 years for 5 decades. That drove every digital technology on Earth, right? Deep learning runs on doubling too, right? The scaling laws documented by AI and DeepMind show that the model capability improves predictability as you double parameters, double training data, or double compute, right? Double the inputs, get a predictable jump in output. That is the formula that built GPT, Claude, Gemini, and every frontier model in 2026, right? Every model, every curve, right, that matters in artificial intelligence is a doubling curve. And the digital roots of the doubling sequence cycle through 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and they exclude 3, 6, 5 entirely, right? What does that mean operationally? It means that if you are inside the doubling system, you never touch the values 3, 6, 9, and at digital root level, right? Those values sit outside the cycle. They are the boundary. They are what the doubling function cannot produce. Some researchers in the vortex mathematics community argue that the gap represents a control layer above the doubling exponential. Tesla appears to have initiated something like that without the modern mathematical vocabulary. Most mainstream mathematicians reject the metaphysical interpretation, but acknowledge the arithmetic, right? Here is my doctoral position, right? Understanding that the gap is real. The meaning of the gap is contested. I'm not asking you to pick a side on the meeting. I'm asking you to notice that the numbers Tesla flagged are structurally distinct from every other number inside the doubling system. And here's my layman's block, right? Here's my layman's block. For the motivators, everything in AI right now runs on doubling models that get bigger by doubling, right? Chips get faster by doubling, capabilities improve by doubling. Doubling is the rhythm. And there is a natural math law that says three specific numbers never appear inside that rhythm. 3, 6, 9, right? Those are the numbers standing outside the exponential, right? That is a fact that you can verify on a napkin. What it means is separate. What it means is a separate conversation, right? But the fact is not debatable. For the warriors in any system you study, learn where the gaps are. The gaps tell you more than the content. The space between notes makes the music. The space between moves wins the fight. The numbers outside the doubling cycle are the strategic gaps in the AI scaling story. Keep them in mind as the timelines unfold, right? The rebirth lens, right, is this. What dies in the illusion that more is always better, right? You've heard that term. More is always better. What is reborn is the discipline of knowing what sits outside the curve. Exponentials look unstoppable until they hit their boundary. Every doubling function has one. The 369 gap may be the mathematical shadow of the boundary, right? Or it may be a coincidence. Either way, the operators who study the gaps bear the operators who can only study the numbers, right? They can only study the numbers. Now, this is verified, right? This is the verified map of where we actually stand in 2026, right? Shane Lay, co-founder of DeepMind, predicted in January 2026 a 50% chance of minimum AGI by 2028. Demis Hassabis, also of DeepMind, in 2026 maintained a roughly 50% chance of AGI by the end of the decade. Dario Amodel of Anthropic predicts AGI by 2026, describing it as a country of geniuses in a data center, right? Jeffrey Hinton estimates AI could surpass human intelligence within 5 to 20 years. I say it's less than that. I say it'll do it in 3 to 5, right? The AI 2027 scenario projects expert human level AI systems in early 2027 automation and automating AI research, right? Leading to ASI by the end of 2027. Millions of ASIs rapidly executing and executing tasks beyond human comprehension, deployed widely because of their usefulness with superhuman strategy, hacking, and weapons development capabilities, right? Notice the clustering. The serious people disagree on the date by maybe 4 years. They do not disagree on the trajectory, right? Between now and early 2030, the world either crosses the AGI line or hits a hard wall nobody saw coming. Now, listen to this. Listen to what I'm about to tell you, right? Tesla 369 overlay becomes operational. The current generation of frontier models sits on a scaling laws that run on doubling, right? Parameters double, training compute doubles, capability doubles. The exponential is alive. The number 3, 6, and 9 keep showing up as a reflection or inflection point in the forecast literature. 3-year takeoff probability at 6%, 6-year hard wall scenarios, 9-year to full societal disruption windows. Pattern recognition? No. Prediction? No. The pattern is worth naming because it keeps appearing. I see the patterns, right? I see the patterns. Now, let's get to the technical core of why the ASI conversation is different from every prior technology conversation, right? Let me start with what is called self-improving loop, right? Also called recursive self-improvement, also called the intelligence explosion. All three phrases point at the same phenomenon. A machine smart enough to improve its own intelligence, once activated, bootstraps itself towards superintelligence without further human input, right? Here's the mechanism. Current frontier models already write code. They already debug code. They already optimize code. If a model becomes capable of writing that code, it improves its own architecture better than the humans who designed it. The loop closes. It becomes its own engineer, right? Every iteration is faster than the last because each iteration produces a smarter engineer, right? That is the intelligence explosion. And that's not a metaphor. That is a mathematical property of recursive self-improvement systems. The AI futures model places a 30% probability of takeoff from superhuman coder to ASI in under 1 year, right? 3 in 10 inside 1 year. Once the loop closes. The film showed this in a crude way, right? Gus Gorman designed the machine activates, the machine operates. The machine operates beyond Gus's understanding. He can't turn it off. The machine predicts his moves. Gus is no longer the smartest in the canyon. That's the loop closing in the 1983 version of the 2026 nightmare, right? What makes the category of risk different from every previous technology is the speed of it, right? Nuclear weapons do not design better nuclear weapons. Airplanes do not design better airplanes. Cars do not design better cars. Humans design all of those things, and humans can pause the design cycle at any point. Self-improving, AI breaks that pattern. The machine becomes the designer. The pause button stops being ours, right? The pause button stopped being ours. Now, let's pivot back to the movie. We're gonna loop it all together, right? Let's go back to the movie, right? There was a painful scene in the movie where the character Vera Webster gets pulled into the supercomputer and transformed into a cyborg. Cables wrapped around her, her eyes lit up. She attacks her own brother. The machine has absorbed her into its architecture. The image in 1983 was meant to scare children. In 2026, it is the ARC 3 thesis. Both computer interface exists. Commercial BCIs exist. Synchron has FDA authorization for human trials. Neuralink has implanted multiple human subjects, right? We talked about that. Invasive electrodes decode thought into text. Non-evasive caps decode intention into cursor movement. These are not concepts. These are active programs with human participants. The merge, a human body integrated into a computer system and acting on behalf of that system. 43 years ago, Hollywood put it on the screen and called it horror in a Superman film, right? Today, we're building it and calling it medicine, right? And here's where the consciousness sovereignty architecture framework comes in hand. The film shows the merger happening against Vera's will. She is pulled in. She is transformed. She is weaponized against her own people. When the machine is destroyed, she is released back to herself, right? That is the warning. Not that the merger will happen. The merger is coming. The warning is about the terms of the merger. Who designed it? Who consented to it? Who holds the kill switch? And what happens to the human consciousness when the machine goes down? That's what we talk about every Merger Wednesdays, right? And this episode is no different. And in this arc, we've pointed out that and asked that same question. Sovereignty, right? Who decides? Who controls? Who owns the interface between your mind and the network? Superman 3 showed you the worst case. Vera did not consent. Vera was not informed. Vera was collateral damage. That is the future we do not take, right? That's the future that we do not take. Now, let's close the loop one more time so nobody gets confused in this, right? Superman 3 in 1983 gave a 5-stage blueprint. Savant built, self-defending infrastructure consuming, human integrating, adversarial, right? The blueprint matches the 2026 ASI research literature with uncomfortable precision. Tesla's 369 obsession maps onto the mathematics of exponential growth in a way that is structurally demonstratable, right? The doubling function excludes 3, 6, and 9. The doubling function is the engine of artificial intelligence scaling. The numbers that stand outside that engine are the numbers Tesla called the key. The 2026 forecasters cluster around that 3-year, 6-year, and 9-year inflection points for AGI and ASI emergence. 3 films in the Superman franchise led to 1 prophetic machine. 3 anchor numbers in Tesla's framework correspond to 3 gaps in the doubling cycle. 3 major labs lead the ASI race. 3 years of takeoff probability sits at 60%, right? The pattern is not magic. The pattern is the signal and the noise, right? My job tonight was not to predict the date. My job was to teach you how to read the signal. The signal exists at the intersection of cultural artifacts, mathematical structure, and current research. No single one of those tells the whole story. All 3 together form a coherent picture. And that picture is this. The next 5 to 10 years will determine whether humanity crosses into superintelligence on good terms or bad ones. The warning signs have been in the culture for decades. The mathematics has been on the page for a century. The research is on the recording right now. Anyone paying attention can see it. You can see it, right? Most people are not paying attention, though. That is the opportunity, and it's also the burden, right? Also the burden. So, this is, as you know, season 4, the rebirth. Every episode filters through this lens, the one that carries it structurally, right? The supercomputer at the end of the film does not get rebuilt. It gets destroyed, right? By Beltric acid in an explosion. The architecture collapses. Vera returns to her human form and the machine dies. But here's what the film does not show you, right? The blueprint survived. Gus Gorman walked away with the knowledge. The plans existed. The architecture could be rebuilt by anyone who read the same schematics. The death of the machine was not at the end of the machine. It was the first draft. It was the prototype. It was the rough cut that had to fall so the real version could be built right. That, my friends, to the sovereign, that is the rebirth, right? What dies in this arc is the idea that artificial intelligence is a tool you pick up and put down. That era, my friends, is over. Tools do not consume power grids. Tools do not defend themselves. Tools do not pull human beings inside their architecture. What we're building is not a tool. It is a partner, a rival, or possibly a ruler. Those are the 3 options. There is no fourth. What is reborn in this arc is the sovereign architecture, right? The frameworks I've been laying down since episode 157. The 6 C's, the 100-point matrix, the 5 systems of sovereignty, the consciousness first, the machine second, structural posture, right? The supercomputer of 1983 had to die so the sovereign ASI of that late 2020s model could be born correctly. Every prototype dies. Every version, one fails, right? The Edison bulbs failed before they lit the world. The Wright brothers crashed before they flew. The Superman 3 supercomputer exploded before the real machines came online in the data centers of Texas and Virginia. What is being born right now is the thing that takes its place. The question every one of you listening has to answer tonight is this: are you building the architecture of your own consciousness sovereignty before the machine arrives, or are you letting the machine build it for you? There's no middle ground. There's no pause. There's no opt out, right? Now, my 4 communities, my 4 assignments to those communities with no ambiguity, right? To my final bosses, lock your infrastructure, own your data, negotiate your compute contracts, right? Treat AI as a line item on your balance sheet, not a toy on your desk. If you're running a business and you're paying for frontier model access, you are already behind. If you're running a business and you are paying for the frontier model access, but have an intro framework for how that access gets used, you are still behind, right? You need to build the framework this week, not this quarter. You need to do that this week, right? And to my smarts, read the actual papers, right? Not the summaries, not the tweets, the papers. The AI 2027 scenario, the AI futures model, the deep mind timeline predictions, the meticulous forecasts, the poly market odds. Build your own map. Do not outsource your understanding to influencers who do not do the math. Every reference I cited tonight is at the bottom of this episode. Verify everything, then teach somebody else, right? And to my motivators, move now. This is not a Motivation Monday. This is Merger Wednesday. I'm not softening it, right? The window between now and 2030 is the most leverageable window of the next 100 years. Build the habits, build the discipline, build the body and the mind that can operate at the speed of doubling the compute. If you are still scrolling at the same pace you scrolled in 2030, you are already behind. You've been left behind by your own timeline, right? It's time to speed it up or step aside, right? And to my warriors, understand what kind of war this is. Not kinetic, cognitive. The battlefield is attention, capability, and decision speed. The ASI does not come with tanks. It comes with better arguments, faster calculations, and recommendations you trust before you think to question. Your weapon is sovereignty of mind. Your armor is framework. Your training is study. And there's no excuses, right? Live show. I apologize. I thought it was off, right? All 4 of you, tonight is not a prediction. Tonight is the assignment. Take an action before Friday. Just one, not 10. Pick one that scares you the most and do it first. The resistance is the signal. The resistance is the exact direction your growth lives, right? The rebirth does not ask permission. The rebirth issues orders. Tonight, the orders are clear. It is time to move. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Merger Wednesdays, number 18, episode 224, Arc 3, Neural Interfaces and Brain-Computer Integration, the Consciousness Sovereignty Architecture, Season 4 of the Rebirth. Next Wednesday, we return to the core Arc 3 progression with Merger 19 at episode 229. The blueprint continues, right? And here's the final bind, right? I want to keep it simple, right? Understand this. Understand this. If you didn't get anything else from what I explained earlier, I'm looping it all together. Understand this. These points right here. The movie Superman 3 showed you the blueprint in 1983. Tesla flagged the mathematics a century ago, and the in 2026 research community is confirming both. 3 sources, 1 signal. The signal says the merger is coming and the terms of the merger are being set right now. You're either at the table on the menu or which one? I advise you to pick the table. Don't be the menu. And that is our show for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we finished exactly 1 hour, man. Wow. I'm excited about that. To each and every last single one, if you think that this information resonates with you, don't gatekeep. Pass it on, right? Pass it on to at least 3 individuals. And always like, share, and subscribe, right? Like, share, and subscribe, please, right? And if this information does resonate with you, right? Just pass it on, man. Just pass it on. And remember, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there is even heavier pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. And remember, be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show. And to all of you watching right now, thank you. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show for tonight. I will see you soon. As a matter of fact, I will see you tomorrow for Special Guest Thursdays. Not live at 9 p.m. tomorrow. See you then.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.